fact. Tacos make everything better, am I right? Unfortunately, it seems that in the past and even today, people just can't really agree on what a taco is. Like this recipe for tacos with chile verde from 1831. Are they even tacos? Well, you'll just have to wait and see. So thank you to Babbel for sponsoring this video as we celebrate and investigate tacos. This time on Tasting History. So what is a taco? Is it this, or even this? Well, the answer across the board is yes, they're all tacos, because the definition of taco changes from place to place and from time to time. And the changing nature of this dish makes it so there aren't really any old recipes for tacos from Mexico. But regardless of the definition of taco, one thing that has always been true is that tacos are a street food. And in one of Mexico's first cookbooks, El Cocinero Mexicano from 1831, the author does give some recipes for street foods like tostadas, chilaquiles, and quesadillas, and says that the way that they're made can kind of be applied to a lot of other street foods. So this is actually a recipe for a chalupa, which means canoe as seen in the loteria card. And this part of the recipe can absolutely apply to tacos. Chile verde. They are made with jitomate or tomato. The first roasted and the second baked. One or the other is ground with green chili and they are thrown in the center with cheese and chopped onion. On top they are decorated with strands of fried meat and minced onion. So we can use this as our base recipe. Now, the chalupas would be fried, and many tacos throughout history, as we'll see later, have also been fried. But in Mexico, most often the filling is wrapped in a soft corn tortilla. These are the type of taco that I enjoyed in my recent trip to Mexico. The food was fantastic, and I got to actually use some of the Spanish that I have learned from our sponsor, Babbel. Last month when I went to celebrate my uncle's birthday in Baja, Mexico, I went to the most amazing store that had every type of tequila and mezcal you could imagine. And while it was great to use some of the Spanish that I had learned from Babbel, Babbel also teaches you other facts about the history and the culture of where you're going that came in really handy. See, Babbel is the #1 language learning app in the world, and I've been able to learn Spanish through the short 10-minute lessons, which are so convenient. And while I've learned a great deal of vocabulary and grammar, and how to make sure that raw onions never appear on my tacos, sin cebolla, except in today's recipe of course, but I'm doing that to myself, I've also learned about Mexican food and drink. So when offered el mezcal con gusano, I knew exactly what I was getting into because Babbel taught me that gusano means agave worm. Actually, if you ever get the chance to try sal de gusano, or worm salt, which is made with the worm, you should because it's oddly perfect for the mezcal. So just click the link in the description to get 65% off of your subscription, or just scan this QR code up in the corner. Oh, also, while I was at that tequila shop, I got the coolest bottle of tequila. I literally bought it just because of the bottle. They say that the tequila inside is good, and I have not tried it yet, so I think I might have to try it with these tacos, which we're about ready to make. So for this recipe, what you'll need is some corn tortillas. So I have actually made corn tortillas here on the channel before in the video on quesadillas, and I will put a link in the description if you want to learn how to make them from scratch. 1 to 2 pounds or 700 grams of meat. Now what meat you use is really up to you. The recipe is not specific. Traditionally now it's pork or beef or chicken, sometimes fish, and all of those will work with this recipe. If you want to go more pre-Columbian, then go with turkey, cactus, squash, iguana, or some of the algae and many insects that live around Lake Texcoco. Personally, I'm going with beef, or carne asada, and some of the traditional flavorings or seasonings for this are lime, cumin, garlic, and cilantro. But if you have a Mexican market near you, you can probably buy it pre-marinated, which is actually probably going to be more traditional than making it yourself. Then 1 pound or 450 grams of either green tomatoes or these tomatillo. So these are the ones that the author says to roast, and they come with this like husk that you have to kind of take off, and then it's super sticky, so you have to wash the tomatillo. They're a lot firmer than most tomatoes, and the flavor is typically not as sweet. They're more acidic and tangy, but they are fantastic. 1 to 4 green chilies, Now, she is not specific as to which green chili to use, and there are lots of green chilies available. Something like a mild hatch or Anaheim or poblano green chili, or the spicier jalapeno or serrano chili. And now a lot of these chilies look very similar to each other, and so when they are all next to each other at the grocery store, you really have to pay attention to what you're buying. Or else you might think that you're buying something very mild and instead get serrano chilies, which are about 10 times hotter than the chili that you were looking for. And that's exactly what I did, so these are going to be a lot spicier than I had intended, and that's just gonna have to be how it is. 1 cup or 150 grams of queso fresco or crumbly fresh cheese, a half onion chopped, and then you can add a little lime or cilantro at the end just to brighten up the dish. Now, first we are going to roast our tomatillo. I am using a comal, which is an earthenware griddle that has been used in Mexico down through South America for 3,000 years. And they're still used today, but if you don't have one of those, you can use a dry pan or a griddle, or actually just roast them over an open flame. And you can leave them whole or slice them, which will save you time. Once there's a bit of char and they get nice and soft, take them off the heat and set them aside while you prepare your chilies. Cut off the stems, then slice the chilies down the middle and remove the seeds. You can also remove the ribs, which is actually where most of the heat is. However, don't do it with your fingers like I did. It's not a problem if you have a not very spicy chili, and this is when I learned that I got the wrong chili because my fingers were on fire. So use a tool. But once that's done, chop them up fine and put them into a molcajete or something that you can grind them in, and then add the tomatillo and grind everything together. And depending on what chili you use, you might want to add a little bit of salt, so give it a taste before moving on. For the meat, if it's well marinated, you should just lay it dry on the comal or a dry pan. If you use dry spices only, then you might need a little bit of olive oil. Now, it's best if the meat is very thin, so it doesn't have to stay on the stove for more than a minute or two on each side. Once it's cooked through, slice it up into thin strips and get all your fixins ready to assemble the tacos. Now, it is the taco assembly that seems to cause so much controversy. Soft shell versus hard shell, onions versus lettuce, lettuce versus cabbage, cheese versus no cheese. And if you're using cheese, which kind of cheese is it? Everyone seems to have an opinion, and once you're subscribed to Tasting History and you listen to the rather convoluted history of tacos, you'll realize that everyone is right and everyone is wrong. So the origins of the taco are really unknown. Even the origin of the word is nebulous at best. It may come from the Old Nahuatl word tlaco, which can mean middle or center. Makes sense, though it seems that the word was never actually used to refer to any kind of food like a taco. But there are old descriptions of foods that could have been like tacos. When describing Aztec women making tortillas, the 16th century Franciscan friar Bernardino de Sahagún says, "She is the maker of tortillas, a tortilla maker. She makes them disc-shaped, thin, long. She makes them into balls, twisted tortillas, twisted about chile. She uses grains of maize. She makes cylindrical tortillas. She makes thick, coarse ones." Cylindrical tortillas wrapped around a chili? Might be a taco. And there's also a description of Aztec commoners taking one tortilla with their right hand and using it to scoop up like a stew or a sauce and putting it into the center of another tortilla in their left hand, making a sort of wet taco. There's also a mention of a seller of folded tortillas with turkey eggs, which could have been a breakfast taco or maybe a breakfast burrito, but again, that is not what they would have called it. So while tlaco does sound kind of like taco, and the meaning could maybe reference making a taco, sort of, the fact that it wasn't used to reference any specific food makes it an unlikely candidate for the origin of the modern taco. More likely, the word came from French. In 1607, the French used the term to refer to the cloth plug that was used to hold the ball in place in a firearm called an arquebus. And by the 18th century, Spanish dictionaries included the word as well, but it didn't mean food inside of a tortilla. In fact, it meant pretty much everything but food inside of a tortilla. Definitions include wedge, wad, plug, billiard cue, a gulp of wine, carpenter's hammer, blowpipe, ramrod, short stocky person, short thick piece of wood. but nothing to do with tortillas, and it likely didn't get any association with food until the 19th century, and it didn't get a first big literary mention until 1891 in Manuel Paino's novel Los Banditos de Rio Frio. In a scene describing the festival of the Virgin of Guadalupe, he says, "The hills and streets were covered with Indians and people from Mexico, having a lunch of chito and tortillas, drunk in salsa and very good pulque, forming merry groups with a devouring appetite, biting off the savory bits of a roast leg of goat, and the boys jumping with their avocado tortilla tacos in hand." But it seems that, at least according to the 1898 Diccionario de Mexicanismos, they still weren't tacos like we would know them today, but more generically, a snack that is taken outside of mealtimes. Now, it's not entirely known how the word became associated with food or how it got its shape, but one theory stems from the silver mines just north of Mexico City. See, 19th century miners would take gunpowder wrapped in paper or else dynamite and plug it into a hole in the rock to blow it up. And you may recall that back in the 18th century, one of the many definitions for taco was a plug, and so they called this plug of dynamite a taco. And one of the miners' favorite snacks during the day was a tortilla with some meat inside that was wrapped up into a roll that kind of looked like a stick of dynamite. These they gave the name tacos de minero, or miner's tacos, and they probably looked a lot more like a taquito than a taco, but were at least getting in the right ballpark. Now, these tacos de minero eventually kind of changed their form and had a name change to tacos sudados, or sweaty tacos. There totally could be an animated series called Tacos Sudados about a taco with severe hyperhidrosis. Cartoon Network would eat that up. Anyway, these tacos, which were filled with beans or potatoes or chicharrón or adobo, were always fried, and they were described in 1901 by Olive Percival when she traveled to Mexico City. There in the gutter stands a young man of about 15 eating a taco, which is a fried turnover filled with chopped, highly seasoned meats. I once purchased one in a briefly seductive cookshop. And in the new animated series, Tacos Sudados, the sweaty taco should totally work in a briefly seductive cookshop. This thing writes itself. Now, many people today believe that since in Mexico they tend to eat their tacos soft-shelled, that the hard-shell taco is an American invention. And clearly that is not true. In fact, the original tacos were hard-shelled because they were deep-fried. But these are the type of taco that did become popular in the US, and the first English language recipe for tacos, and maybe actually the first written recipe for tacos ever, comes from the California Mexican-Spanish cookbook from 1914, and it describes a taco made by putting chopped cooked beef and chili sauce in tortilla made of meal and flour, folded, edges sealed together with egg, fried in deep fat, chili sauce served over it. So very different from any taco that you would get today. It sounds more like it's a cross between an empanada and an enchilada, but it seems that this was the type of taco that was popular for the first half of the 20th century, at least here in the United States. Now, the modern American taco owes its invention to two people. One was a German named William Gebhardt, who moved to Texas, started to go by the name Willie, and in 1894 developed dried chili powder, which allowed ground beef to have a distinct Tex-Mex flavor all year round. The other was a California man who came up with the pre-made shell. So instead of having to deep fry the entire taco, like in Mexico City or the early Californian recipes, he was able to take the pre-made shell and put the ingredients in after frying, which helped the taco to stay crispier longer. A couple years later, he watched as Richard and Maurice McDonald made a killing when they opened a few burger joints in his neck of the woods. Well, this man, Glenn Bell, decided to follow their lead and opened his own taqueria in San Bernardino, California in 1954. A few years later, he opened El Taco in Long Beach, and in 1962 he decided to put his name on the place and opened the first Taco Bell in Downey, California. He quickly opened 8 more restaurants, was bringing in over $50,000 a year, and decided to make it into a franchise. They blew up, and by 1978, Taco Bell had 868 restaurants. Then Bell sold the company to Pepsi Cola, and a few gorditas, chalupas, and one amazing chihuahua later, Yo quiero Taco Bell. And Taco Bell became responsible for bringing, I'm not going to say Mexican food, so the idea of Mexican food to the world. And while that taco is really no longer anything like what is eaten in Mexico today or in the past, it seems that today or in the past, nobody's really been able to agree what a taco is. And as much as I loved a 2 a.m. Taco Bell taco or Mexican pizza back in college, I think that this recipe from 1831 might be more my taste today. So once you have all of your ingredients prepped, just warm your tortillas either on a comal or in a pan until they darken and start to blister. Then put on a bit of salsa, cheese, onions, meat, and a little more onion, and you're good to go. And here we are, tacos from 1831. And like I said, I actually don't like raw onions, especially on my tacos, so usually I go sin cebolla, but I will go con cebolla for today. Yeah, let's do it. It's definitely spicy. But not as spicy as I would think. There it is. It's coming in waves. Okay, so there is spice to it. I knew there would be, but once I can get past that, once my palate moves past that, which might not be for a few hours, but I can taste the tanginess of the tomatillo. They're very, very different from regular tomatoes, and I really, really like them. And they kind of actually, it goes really well with, I hate to say it, with the raw onion. Makes it really nice. The cheese, I think I would need a lot more cheese to really even know that it's there. Maybe it adds a little bit to the texture, but unnecessary. The meat's fantastic. I could just eat a bowl of this meat. But what's really interesting is the tortilla, because it's kind of crispy on the outside because of the way that we cooked it, but then it's very soft and, supple on the inside. So you don't want to overcook them because you do want to kind of be able to roll them up like, the taco that you would blow up a mine with. But now that I've had a bite of the taco, I do think it is time to try this tequila. That's smooth. That's good, especially for buying it, based on the bottle. Though, I guess they put good stuff in these bottles. It's a whole thing, but keep in the bottle, and I'm gonna drink the tequila. So make sure to follow me on Instagram, have a couple tacos, hard, soft, it doesn't matter, and I will see you next time on Tasting History. Hot or not, I'm finishing them.